A shark long enough to fill a school bus. Jaws wide enough to take a bite the size of a small car. Lined with serrated teeth taller than your hand. Heavier than a dozen great whites stacked together, cruising the open ocean and swallowing prey the size of a killer whale whole. That is the Megalodon, you know. Now here is the problem. We have never found a complete one. No skull, no fins, no skeleton. Everything you just pictured was reconstructed from teeth and a small handful of loose bones. And the newest science says that picture is wrong. Start with what everyone actually agrees on, because there isn't much. Megalodon was real. It was gigantic. For a stretch of roughly 20 million years, it was the largest predatory shark that ever lived, and it hunted whales for a living. Its teeth turn up on the coasts of nearly every continent, so we know it patrolled warm and temperate seas all over the planet. That part is solid. The trouble begins the moment you try to describe what it looked like. The image in your head, the one from the posters and the documentaries and the films, is a great white shark scaled up to the size of a boat. Same blunt torpedo body, same triangular fins slicing the surface, same face, just monstrous. It's the most recognizable prehistoric predator on Earth, and a child can draw it from memory. Almost every line of that drawing is a guess. Here is the thing nobody mentions. We have never found a Megalodon skeleton. Not a partial one, not a crushed one, not one. Sharks are built from cartilage instead of bone, and cartilage breaks down long before it can fossilize. So the animal that supposedly ruled the seas left behind almost nothing solid to rule with. What it did leave is teeth, thousands of them, because a shark sheds and regrows teeth its whole life, and the biggest are close to 18 centimeters tall, larger than a grown man's hand. Beyond the teeth, there's essentially one relatively complete run of vertebrae, a string of discs each about the size of a dinner plate, plus a scatter of loose vertebrae from other animals. That's the physical Megalodon. Everything else, the body, the fins, the shape of the head, the exact length, was filled in by inference. And a tooth, however impressive, is a limited witness. It can tell you the animal was huge, that it was built to grip and shear, that it ate meat and lots of it. It cannot tell you how long the body behind it was, how deep the chest sat, where the fins went, or how the whole thing moved through water. Those are exactly the details that make an animal, and those are exactly the details Megalodon didn't fossilize. To draw the rest, you have to borrow it from something living. And the something we borrowed from shaped everything that followed. You can see how far that borrowing could run inside the museums themselves. Early attempts to rebuild Megalodon's jaws arranged real teeth into a great white's tooth pattern, and they produced gaping frames a grown person could stand inside, jaws mounted for photographs with rows of people sitting in them. Some of those famous reconstructions were later judged too large. The spacing and the arch quietly copied from the wrong animal. The teeth were genuine. The monster built around them was part guess. That gap between the real fossil and the imagined body is the whole story of Megalodon. So where did the giant great white come from? From the teeth. Megalodon's teeth are serrated, broad, triangular, and they look a lot like the teeth of a modern great white. For about a century, that resemblance did all the heavy lifting. It even set the numbers. The standard way to estimate Megalodon's length was to measure the height of a tooth and run it through an equation, and that equation was built by studying great whites, the closest thing alive with comparable teeth. So the famous 50 and 60-foot figures didn't come from a Megalodon body. They came from great white math applied to a Megalodon tooth. If the teeth looked like a great white's, the thinking went, the animal probably looked like one too. So take a great white, blow it up until its teeth match, and there's your monster. It was never a measurement. It was a stand-in. And stand-ins have a way of hardening into facts when nobody checks them for 100 years. There's a deeper irony buried in that resemblance. For a long time, people assumed the great white was simply Megalodon's shrunken descendant, the giant's bloodline surviving at a smaller size. That turned out to be wrong too. The two sharks aren't close relatives at all. Megalodon belongs to a separate lineage of megatooth sharks that is now completely extinct, while the great white comes from a different branch, closer to the Marcos. Their similar teeth are two hunters evolving the same tool for the same job, not a family portrait. So the model we leaned on for a century wasn't even a cousin filling in for a cousin. It was a stranger that happened to wear similar teeth. For a long time, there was no better option. And honestly, the stand-in wasn't crazy. The teeth really do match. Megalodon and the great white belong to the same broad group of sharks. Both are apex hunters. Both went after big, warm-blooded prey. If you needed a rough model, a supersized great white got the important things right. A huge, fast, killing machine at the very top of its world. The approach wasn't lazy. It just quietly assumed that a shark with similar teeth had to have a similar body, and that assumption was never tested against the actual bones. Even the first serious full-body reconstruction, built back in the 1990s, worked by scaling up great white anatomy piece by piece. The result looked convincing. It also inherited every one of the great white's proportions by default. Then, in 2022, someone finally tested it against the fossils themselves. A team led by Jack Cooper built the first three-dimensional reconstruction of Megalodon anchored in real material, using that dinner plate vertebral column and checking it against the anatomy of several living relatives rather than one great white. For the first time, the monster had numbers you could defend. Around 16 meters long, about the length of a school bus, a mass in the region of 61 tons, heavier than 10 great whites combined, a stomach that could have held thousands of liters, fast enough to cruise across entire ocean basins between meals, with jaws able to take prey up to 8 meters long, an animal the size of a modern killer whale, and swallow much of it in a few bites. For once, the scale wasn't a wild exaggeration. But look closely, and that model still borrowed one thing. Its overall body outline was still guided by the sleek, torpedo-shaped sharks in the great white's family. And this was a real whale killer, not a paper legend. We can show that directly. Fossil whale bones from the age of Megalodon turn up scarred with exactly the kind of gouges those serrated teeth would leave. Bite marks on flippers, on tailbones, on the dense parts of the skeleton, where the muscle and blood ran richest. Estimates of its bite force run to well over 100,000 newtons, among the most powerful bites ever calculated for any animal. And it started life already enormous. Analysis of the growth bands in its bones suggests newborn pups were around 2 meters long, bigger than many adult sharks swimming today. Megalodon wasn't picking at the edges of the ocean. It was attacking the largest animals around it and winning. The seas it hunted were richer in big prey than anything alive has seen since. The oceans of that age were crowded with whales, dolphins, seals, and sea cows of every size, a moving feast that could support a predator this expensive. Those same growth bands, read like the rings of a tree, suggest a single megalodon could live for the better part of a century. Decades of steady hunting to fuel an enormous body. This was not a brief, freakish monster. It was a long-lived, ocean-spanning apex predator that held the top of the food web for millions of years. Which is what makes the next discovery so strange, because it came not from the bones at all, but from the chemistry sealed inside the teeth. In 2023, researchers ran fossil megalodon teeth through a method called clumped isotope thermometry, a way of reading the temperature at which the tooth mineral first formed, recorded in how heavy carbon and oxygen atoms bonded together. A second isotope technique on the same material backed it up. The teeth had remembered how warm the animal's body was. The answer surprised almost everyone. Megalodon wasn't a cold shark drifting at the temperature of the water around it. Its body ran warm, an estimated average near 27 degrees Celsius, several degrees hotter than the surrounding sea. It had regional endothermy, the same trick a few living sharks and tunas use to keep their swimming muscles heated. A warm shark is a faster, stronger, farther-ranging shark, able to hunt in cooler water where cold-blooded rivals would slow to a crawl. The monster wasn't only big, it was running hot. But running hot is never free. Every degree a body holds above the water around it has to be paid for in food. A warm shark has to catch more and eat more than a cold one of the same size, just to keep the furnace lit. In an ocean crowded with whales, that was a bill Megalodon could easily pay, and in return, warmth bought it speed, reach, and raw power. It's the kind of bargain that works beautifully right up until the food supply flinches. Hold on to that, because the same warmth that made Megalodon unstoppable is going to reappear at the very end of its story, wearing a different face. Now hold those two facts together, a warm-blooded giant that hunted whales, and go back to the bones, because this is where the familiar picture starts to crack for real. The largest Megalodon vertebrae we have are, frankly, too thin. For an animal supposedly built like a bulky, deep-bodied great white the size of a bus, the diameter of those vertebral discs is surprisingly small. The bones and the poster disagree. Something in the reconstruction was off, and it wasn't a rounding error. In 2024, a team of 26 shark experts from institutions around the world pulled on that thread, and the tank-shaped Megalodon came apart. When they rebuilt the body from the real vertebral column using great white proportions, the math contradicted itself. The same specimen implied about 11 meters of spine, but only about 9 meters of total body, and you cannot fit 11 meters of vertebrae inside a 9-meter shark. The great white template wasn't merely imperfect, it was geometrically impossible. Their conclusion was that Megalodon's body had to be more elongated than anyone had drawn it. Not a stocky, deep-chested tank, but a longer, leaner animal, closer in outline to a modern mako or even a lemon shark than to a great white. And once you stretch the body into those proportions, the length doesn't shrink, it can grow. Some estimates, built on this leaner plan, push the animal well past the old figures, toward 20 meters and beyond. The shark everyone pictured as a bulked-up great white may have looked more like a stretched-out cruiser, and a longer one at that. The leaner body isn't only a better fit for the bones, it's a better fit for the biology. A deep, stocky shark the size of a bus would fight enormous drag every time it moved, a brutal cost for an animal that had to keep a warm body fueled and cross oceans to find enough whales. A long, streamlined shape is what you'd actually want for that life. An efficient cruiser that can travel far on less energy. The slender Megalodon and the warm-blooded Megalodon aren't two separate surprises. They're the same animal, finally starting to make sense. I want to be honest about this, because the real lesson of Megalodon is honesty about certainty. That 2024 study is not the final word. It's contested, and other researchers pushed back hard on the exact shape. Nobody is claiming we now know the precise silhouette. What the study did establish, and what has largely held, is the negative. The specific great white scaled-up body that ruled a century of art and film is not supported by the bones we have. We were confident about a shape we had never measured, and the measurement, when it finally came, said no. And the slimmer, hotter Megalodon changes more than its portrait. It changes why it died. That magnificent design came with a long list of requirements. Keeping a 60-ton body several degrees above the sea and driving it across oceans burns an enormous amount of fuel. So it needed abundant large prey, always. And it needed something else people forget, starting with those 2-meter pups. Baby Megalodons didn't take on whales. They grew up in warm, shallow coastal nurseries, protected shallows where juveniles could feed and stay safe until they were big enough for open water. We can actually find these places. Certain fossil sites, like one in Panama, are packed almost entirely with the small teeth of young megalodons, which researchers read as nursery grounds. So the giant needed warm, stable coastlines just as much as it needed whales. Every one of those needs was a place the world could hurt it. And around 5 million years ago, the world began to change in exactly the wrong ways. The clue, again, is in the teeth. This time, the zinc locked inside them, which records roughly where an animal fed in the food chain. When researchers compared Megalodon's tooth chemistry to that of early great white sharks living in the same waters, the two overlapped. They were hunting the same kinds of prey. The great white, smaller, quicker to mature, faster to reproduce, and far cheaper to run, was moving into Megalodon's exact line of work. And the chemistry shows the balance tipping. Over time, Megalodon's position in the food web slipped downward, while the great whites held steady. The animal we had spent a century using as a stand-in for Megalodon was, in reality, one of the things competing it out of existence. Then the environment pulled out the floor. The slide from the Pliocene toward the ice ages brought cooling seas and dropping, shifting sea levels. Continental shelves shrank. Whale populations moved and thinned. The warm, shallow, coastal nurseries that juvenile megalodons relied on were drained and broken up. For a giant, warm-blooded specialist with an enormous appetite, a cheaper rival rising underneath it, and its nursery system falling apart, it was a series of blows landing on every one of its dependencies at once. And Megalodon didn't fall alone. Around the same stretch of time, a wave of extinctions swept the oceans, erasing a large share of the planet's marine giants as the coasts they all depended on kept shifting. Megalodon was the most famous casualty of a much broader collapse. By roughly 3.5 million years ago, it was gone. This is usually where someone asks the obvious question. If we've never found a skeleton, and the ocean is mostly unexplored, could Megalodon still be down there, hiding in the deep? The biology is the answer, and it's a flat no. This was not a creature of the lightless abyss. It was a warm water hunter tied to sunlit coasts, dependent on shallow nurseries and on whales that live near the surface. An animal that size, eating that much, in the waters where we swim and fish, would leave unmistakable traces. Fresh bites on living whales, fresh teeth on beaches, sightings that never stop. There are none. The deep sea didn't hide Megalodon. The changing world erased it, and the ocean kept the receipts in stone. So assemble the corrected picture. The old story said Megalodon was a scaled-up great white, a bulky, unstoppable tank that ruled the seas until some vague bad luck finally ended it. What the old story got right is real and worth keeping. It was a giant, it was warm-blooded, and it was a true apex predator that hunted the largest animals in the ocean. What it got wrong is nearly everything about the how. The body wasn't a great white's. The shape was probably longer and leaner. Even the length came from great white math. And the extinction wasn't random misfortune striking an invincible monster. The very traits that made Megalodon dominant, its enormous size, its warm and hungry body, its dependence on big prey and warm coasts, were the exact traits that left it no room to move when the climate turned and a leaner rival arrived. It didn't die because it was weak. It died because it was magnificent in a way that only worked in a world that stopped existing. Which brings us back to the tooth. That serrated blade in a collector's palm, taller than a human hand, is very nearly the only honest thing we have. Not the bust-length body, not the bulldog face, not the exact figure on the tape measure. Those are all reconstructions, and one of the most famous of them just collapsed under its own evidence. We grew an entire monster out of a tooth and told ourselves the picture was settled. Then we looked harder, and the picture was wrong. That isn't a failure of science. It's science working out loud, overturning a 100-year-old assumption in real time. The strange, humbling truth about the most famous predator that ever swam is that we still don't have its skeleton. And until we do, the Megalodon in your head will stay a best guess, drawn around a single tooth, waiting for the next discovery to redraw it.